Did you have a good time, Tyler?
Yeah.
Is this all your loot?
Yep.
You love Halloween?
Yeah, I love Halloween.
What is up, guys? It's your buddy Tyler coming at you with a brand new video here on My Retro Life. And did you hear that? Oh man, it must be the spooky time of year. You know what I'm talking about. Halloween is right around the corner, and every year here on My Retro Life, I try to put together a retro game themed Halloween episode.
Trick or treat! Thank you.
This time around, we're talking about my dad's favorite horror video games. And not just any old horror video games, no, the games he played and beat.
Wow.
Let's not waste any more time, guys, and jump right in to number 10.
Oh, Dracula!
But first, a word about this video's sponsor, Geology. I love this time of year. It's the Halloween season, and everywhere you look, ghouls, ghosts, and even a few goblins are lurking around every corner. Take this guy, for example. Ugh, man, he really let himself go. I bet you anything he doesn't have a daily skincare routine. And rather than end up like him, I'll just sign up for Geology. Geology is a 26-time award-winning skin, hair, and body care company. They create simple and effective skincare and hair care routines customized just for you with ingredients that are proven to work. Geology makes commitment easy. Their routines and products are easy to stick to, not complicated, and are tailored for each individual. I took their quiz, and in a very short amount of time, they created a skincare product plan ready for me to order. This guy, he's been using brand X. Geology has distilled skincare to its essentials with trusted, dermatologist-approved ingredients. They take care of all of your bathroom needs. And right now, for a limited time, use my code RETRO70 or scan the QR code on the screen, and they will give you an exclusive 70% off their award-winning skincare trial set. On top of that, you can get 30% off on the add-on products of your choice when you add it to your trial. Get it before it's gone. You don't want to end up like this guy. Coming in at number 10, it's Doom on Atari Jaguar. That's right, not the PC, not the Super Nintendo, the 3DO, or any of the other thousands of ports that Doom received on home consoles. No, the Atari Jaguar was heads and tails my dad's favorite version of the game. And this game, oh man, it creeped us out to no end back in the day. I remember watching my dad play Doom with the lights turned down late at night. We'd be done with school and work, and here we were ready for a nighttime of thrills with this incredible first-person shooter by id Software. I mean, this game was legendary. Everybody and their dog, I feel like, has played this game, including my dog Maggie. My dog Maggie loved playing Doom. Actually, no, that's not true, but my dad did. And he eventually got to the very end of this game. I mean, we worked hard together playing the Atari Jaguar version of Doom. I remember trading levels back and forth with Dad and making our way deeper and deeper into the hellish world of Doom. And man, this game was nightmare fuel, but at the same time, it was such an action game where you felt such control with the various weapons you had, you know, the shotgun, the rocket launcher. I mean, you were just destroying these demons and monsters, and it was scary, but I always felt like we were in control of the situation. And so we made our way to the very end of the game and eventually beat the game.
Doom! Only better than any other system on the Jaguar.
The Atari Jaguar version is my favorite home console port of Doom, and it was Dad's also. He loved getting to the end of this game. And even though the Atari Jaguar version does not have any music, I actually applaud the developers for not including the in-game music. I know it has something to do with hardware limitations, but the fact that Doom on the Atari Jaguar doesn't have music, it makes it all the more creepier. Coming in at number 9, it's Blue Stinger on the Sega Dreamcast. Now, this was a launch title on the Sega Dreamcast. We originally got this game as the Japanese imported version with our Japanese Sega Dreamcast in 1999. And oh my gosh, early 1999, getting this game way before the system launched in September. We got this around my birthday in April of 1999. And man, guys, Blue Stinger, I loved it. And so did Dad. The Japanese version of the game is so much better than the American version. The Japanese version of Blue Stinger actually has cinematic graphics. The camera was placed in these traditional kind of cinematic positions, just like those older survival horror games, and it made for a much better gaming experience. This was the way the developers intended it. For some reason, when the game was ported to the West, they decided, we're going to ditch the fixed camera angles, we're going to ditch all of these awesome cinematic angles, and we're going to make it a behind-the-shoulder, third-person action, adventure, survival horror game. And the game really suffers in the American version. I love the fact that Pen Pen Triicelon, another Sega Dreamcast launch title, actually makes its way into the game in the mall segment of the game, which is by far my favorite area to explore in this whole game. That music is so perfect, and I've often used this music like for Christmas episodes of my Retro Life and stuff. It's so perfect to be hearing this kind of Christmas mall music while you're killing these evil monsters and trying to survive. Oh, it's so much fun. Blue Stinger, man, what a hidden gem. Dad loved it, I loved it, and Dad beat it. He actually made his way through it all the way through. I remember us both beating it and feeling mighty triumphant. Coming in at number 8, it's Dracula on the Sega CD. Now, this was developed by Psygnosis, based on the Bram Stoker's Dracula movie that came out in 1993. It utilized the Sega CD hardware to its full capacity. I mean, this was a full motion video game, but using some sprite work and action platforming. It's really interesting as you walk along in this sort of like pre-rendered sprite that you control on the screen. You're walking along the Transylvania countryside and making your way to Dracula's castle, but it is full motion video that you're controlling your sprite character on. And it was so unique for its time. I mean, really, this was a game that was a showpiece for the Sega CD and what the system was capable of doing with this combination of traditional gameplay, platforming, and action with full motion video. When it was released, it was infamously broken. The whole game freezes on you, or you get stuck and you can't get out of it. You get like stuck in the game. They later released a revision of the game that was bundled with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So I remember us collecting the double pack Dracula and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. That was really a cool 2-pack. And actually, that version's fixed. The problems are fixed and you can play through the game. But my dad, man, he was pretty hardcore with this game. He loved the movie. He made his way through it, and I can remember watching him play it, just kind of moving along and taking his time. I think he really liked this action platformer because it was a game that he could go at with like a pace, a slower, more methodical pace. It was so much fun watching him get through this game with all the full motion video cutscenes from the movie, and just the atmosphere, the feeling that this game gave you was unlike any other. And really that was, a testament to the Sega CD and what it was bringing. And it's not a perfect game. It's not fantastic by any means, but I enjoyed it for what it was. And it was really cool to play back in the day. Coming in at number 7, Dr. Chaos on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Oh man, this was an early one. I think it's actually the oldest game on this list. And I was a wee little lad when I first played this game with my dad, probably 4 or 5 years old. We got it from my original Nintendo. Dr. Chaos was one of those games that kind of came out and we didn't know what to expect from it. We didn't realize it would be such a scary game, and it really was. The atmosphere, going around this house and making your way in and out of the doors. It was such a unique game back then, especially. I think it was the first game I ever played that was a combination of action platformer, side-scrolling action platformer. But then when you go in the doors and inside the house, you actually go into a first-person mode. As you're exploring in those first-person modes, looking for objects and, things to find, and those monsters jump out of the doorways. They come without warning. It startles you. You're not expecting it. You feel like you should be safe in this room, right? But no, the monsters jump in and you have to fight them. You go outside of that first-person perspective. You're back out in the side-scrolling action platformer mode, and they chase you out of the doorway still. You still have to fight them. And so there's this real sense of, like, I'm not safe. I have to fight this monster, and you never know when those monsters are going to jump out at you in those first-person modes. And so, man, this was a really scary game for me, so I left it all for Dad. This was his game through and through. I would watch him play Dr. Chaos, and I specifically remember watching him get all the way to the end and fighting that final boss and having trouble with the boss and actually calling up my cousin Manny on the phone because Manny also had this game and discussing with Manny, trying to figure out how to beat the final boss. Now, I've talked to cousin Manny about this and he doesn't remember, but I remember specifically. I remember Dad having conversations with Manny about Dr. Chaos, and of course it was the king of games who knew how to beat it. Well, I can say that I remember cousin Manny helping Dad beat this game. Coming in at number 6, it's Carrier on the Sega Dreamcast, another survival horror game in the same vein as Resident Evil, but this one comes to us courtesy of Jalico.
What's it say?
Jericho. Japanese.
This was a really unique game. I really loved watching Dad play this game because it was such a cool twist on the whole survival horror genre. This one feels a lot like John Carpenter's The Thing. You're on this aircraft carrier, this giant aircraft carrier that crashed, and you're part of a rescue team that goes in to figure out what went wrong. They go to the crash site, and the carrier was carrying this virus, this sort of chemical that got into all of the crew members. And the thing I really remember about this one is that all the monsters are turning into these kind of plant creatures. Really gruesome, really creepy looking too. I remember actually having nightmares around this time, playing it in 2000. I was probably 14 years old. And I remember having nightmares of turning into a plant monster because of this game. So this game gave me nightmares. Well, Dad really loved the game. I don't think it gave him nightmares because he was able to get all the way to the end of it. And one of the things that I know that he loved so much about this was it was not like other survival horror games of the time that used pre-rendered backgrounds. No, this was a full 3D environment that was sort of similar to Resident Evil Code Veronica and Blue Stinger. And so this was another Sega Dreamcast survival horror game that really just, it just clicked with Dad. He loved it. He played a lot of horror games on the Sega Dreamcast. I remember this game being pretty difficult back then, and specifically Dad having to look at game facts, game FAQs, that website, pulling up the walkthroughs and reading through them and trying to figure out what he had to do next. And oftentimes I would lay on the couch as he played the game and I would read through this printed game fact. We would print it out from the internet and I would read through it and try to help him through a game, and vice versa. Oftentimes he would do the same for me on other games. And so I got to do that for him on this game, Carrier, and it was really cool getting through it. It's been forever since I played it, but I really remember him loving it. And in part, he loved it so much because the game really felt like a spiritual successor to this next game on the list. Coming in at number 5, it's Deep Fear on the Sega Saturn. Now, this is a real hidden gem, guys. This is a game that flew under so many people's radars back then in 1998 when it came out on the Sega Saturn in Japan and Europe. It did not have a North American release. And so Dad and I had to import the game. We were just hungry for these survival horror games. We loved Resident Evil, and this just looked fantastic. And you were on a underwater research facility, like a submarine type of research facility. It's mutants that you're fighting. You're not fighting zombies, but they might as well be zombies, right? Resident Evil underwater. Best way I can describe it. The game. It's crazy that they got a release in Europe, though. Would have been cool to have the English version. This was another game that I remember having to print out FAQs on GameFAQs.com and reading and helping Dad get through the game. And we had that cool partnership back then when we played games together. It was so much fun. And I have so many good memories of him playing this game and just all the shocks and the scares. This one was scary. I think it was the graphics, the primitive kind of graphics of the time. It wasn't quite 128-bit generation. It was still 32-bit. And A lot of those jaggies and a lot of those kind of, early polygons made for a scary time in these horror games that were released back then. I remember Dad getting all the way through it. Again, he just loved the premise, really hooked onto the gameplay. And sometimes he would buy a game like this, and he would buy it for me, but then I wouldn't necessarily get into it. And so a lot of times Dad would then basically say to himself, okay, well, if Tyler's not going to play it, then I'll go ahead and play it. And so this, I think, was one of those games. I think maybe he got it from me, but maybe he thought in the back of his mind, maybe Tyler's not going to play it, might be too scared of it. I was 12 when it came out. And I was a little scared of this game, and so I just let Dad take care of it. The creepy environment and the underwater setting really sets a tone for this one that's different than other survival horror games in the same genre, and I really recommend it. Definitely check it out. With the lights turned down low, boot up Deep Fear on the Sega Saturn. You're not going to regret it. Coming in at number 4, it's Mansion of Hidden Souls on the Sega CD. Now, this is another game, another Sega game on this list. They had a lot of great horror titles that were released on their platforms, on their consoles. And Mansion of Hidden Souls, oh my gosh, so many incredible memories watching Dad play this game. And even myself playing it, but really I had to let Dad play it because, man, it scared me to no end. Walking around this mansion where all these butterfly creatures are flying around, and they're like the spirits of humans that have been turned into butterflies, and they're trying to warn you about this hunter that is roaming around the mansion looking for you. He's like taking your little sister who's gone missing, and you have to find her in this mansion. The first person perspective, oh my gosh, it was so scary. It was so unique. This was a kind of a point and click style game like Myst or Seventh Guest, those kind of games back then. But I really feel like this game had such a personality and atmosphere. And I think Dad loved it so much because it really felt like you were playing one of those old 1950s and 40s black and white horror movies back then. You had movies like The Old Dark House and House on Haunted Hill. He just loved that stuff. He loved B horror movies, and this felt like you were playing one of those movies. Oh man, so many great memories going through this game with him. And I've talked about this game on the channel before. This was one of his favorite Sega CD games of all time, and he beat this game. So it was definitely one of his favorite horror video games of all time. That's why it had to make it on this list. Coming in at number 3, it's Splatterhouse 2 on the Sega Genesis. This classic series by Namco, of course, it had to be on this list, right? Dad loved the Splatterhouse series, and I had to pick one of the trilogy, the classic Splatterhouse trilogy. Man, Splatterhouse, such a great action horror platformer. I mean, you play as this guy named Rick who is being terrorized by this terror mask, very much like Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th, but the mask is basically turning you evil, it's controlling you, and it's telling you that you need to try to save your wife, Jennifer, and she is somewhere inside this house, and you've got to rescue her. This is the sequel to the first game. It basically has a very similar storyline, just more of the same here, but really what they were able to do in Splatterhouse 2 was just up the ante in almost every way. The graphics are fantastic. It's got some of the most macabre, creeping visuals that you'll ever encounter in an action platformer, even besting that of Castlevania. Really, when I want to go for those really creepy, just really give you that sense of horror in an old school video game, I'm going to probably put on a Splatterhouse game. And really, it lives up to its name. It's very violent, very gory, and man, the bosses in this game are really where it's at. I mean, those are the creepy parts of the game. That first level boss, oh man, it really stands out to me. What a crazy, creepy looking creature. And it just goes on and on from there. This was a game that Dad really loved and latched onto. It leaned so heavily into the horror genre and the classic movies that came out of that genre. And this was one that he played and got all the way to the end of and beat. Coming in at number 2 is Alien vs. Predator on the Atari Jaguar. Man, Dad was a big fan of the console, and Alien vs. Predator was by far the killer app for the system. I have so many great memories roaming the corridors of Alien vs. Predator as the Marine, the best way to play the game, as the Marine. You could play as the alien. You could also play as the Predator. And really, it was 3 different campaigns, which was great. It really made the game really feel like a big, long game. And the Marine, though, was the best way to play it. It felt the most, like you were a Marine. He was a human character, and you were there trapped on the ship with the alien and the Predator. And oh my gosh, guys, the atmosphere in this game, with there being no music, all you hear is the hum of that corridor as you walk through. I'll never forget those first steps and him picking up the shotgun and saying, "What on earth got a hold of this guy?"
What on earth got a hold of this guy? Oh my goodness.
He sounded so much like Wolverine from X-Men. I remember that's all I would always say, hey, it's like Wolverine from X-Men. And oh man, this game, just the sense of dread that you felt turning and walking into every corner you take. You feel like those aliens are gonna start flocking towards you and kill you. And then when you shoot them and kill them, you can't step over their acid because the acid will kill you. We would have friends of mine would come over and watch us play this game, and they would get terrified out of their minds. It was almost like something fun for us to do. It's like, hey, why don't you invite Philip over? Why don't you invite Albert, Chris, and let's show them Alien versus Predator and see how they react. Hand them the controller. Here, you play. Here, give it a shot, Chris. And just watch their terrified expressions as they try to play the game. So many fun memories playing it and being scared out of my mind, watching my dad play it and taking turns. I enjoyed playing it, but only for so much. I would here, you take the Jaguar controller, you try to get through the rest of this. And he did. Dad got all the way to the end. He beat the Marine mode. He didn't beat the game on Alien campaign or Predator campaign. Those two are much harder, if you ask me. But I remember him getting all the way to the end and actually figuring out how to set the bomb and do all the things you have to do to beat this game. It's kind of tricky, and it's very cryptic. It doesn't really hold your hand, this game. I loved watching Dad beat this game. I remember him beating it, and just the excitement around beating it was next level. And coming in at number 1, topping the list on this very spooky edition, it's Silent Hill 2 on the Sony PlayStation 2. This was my dad's favorite horror video game by far. The game's soundtrack, its characters, the storyline, making your way back to Silent Hill, and just experiencing everything this game has to offer. It is one of the creepiest games ever made. And that is no joke, guys. I know the game it's actually 22 years old. I can't believe I'm saying that. It's crazy. But man, back in the day, as a sequel to the original Silent Hill, this just was so much better in every way than the first Silent Hill. Some people, I think, feel like the first game is creepier because of its primitive graphics. It felt like you were taking a trip down into hell or something. It was such a creepy game, and the nightmare fuel that this game gave you with some of the locations in this one are just so creepy, like the prison, the hotel, the hospital. And those nurse creatures, oh my gosh, those doctor and nurse creatures as they walk down the hallways of the hospital. Oh, nightmare fuel, guys. Even just thinking about it is getting me scared. And really, it's one of the best games you can play around Halloween. Dad worked hard to beat every original Silent Hill game, 1, 2, and 3. He never had 4, but he adored this series from 1, 2, and 3. I had to pick one of those 3, and if I had to pick one, it had to be 2. 2 is the one that I think really made him fall in love with the franchise. It was one of Dad's favorite gaming franchises, and this was a game he loved just getting lost in, and I think he just loved how spooky and creepy it was. It was unlike any other horror experience I think he had up until that point. Walking through all the fog, just the town that is just steeped in fog, shrouded, and then hearing that siren and knowing that you're going into the nightmare zone. Everything is about to get so much worse for you. That was what Silent Hill was all about. And Silent Hill 2 did it better than I think any other game. This was one I watched Dad beat. I watched him beat it because I was too scared to play it. Well, that's it, guys. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed this top 10 favorite horror video games that Dad played and beat back in the day. You might be surprised that Resident Evil wasn't on this list. Oddly enough, Resident Evil was not, like, he really loved Resident Evil, but for some reason it was me who played all the Resident Evil games. I loved Resident Evil games, and Dad just liked watching me play those games, but that's why Resident Evil is not on the list. It's interesting. Dad was like the Silent Hill player, and I was the Resident Evil player. I wonder if what that says about the two of us. If this is your first time to the channel, please do consider subscribing. I love talking about my game-crazy family and all the amazing adventures we had with video games, so many of which were caught on tape by my dad. And hey guys, look in the background there. I guess you have been subscribing because look, that's a silver play button. We did it. We got there. 100,000 subscribers. We crossed that milestone recently, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you for being a part of something that is so special to me and my family. Getting to share my memories of gaming back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s with my family and my dad, who loved video games so much and loved his family. Dad, this was for you. This is for him. For Dad. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you watching. I'll catch you next time.